My fingers traced the spine of a dusty blue ledger, the gold leaf lettering so faded I could barely make out the year. 1888. This was my life as an intern at Thorne Enterprises. Not fetching coffee, but locked away on the 44th floor, tasked with archiving the CEO's private collection of historical business records. The job posting had been cryptic, the interview process unusually rigorous for a temporary position, hinting at a level of secrecy that was both thrilling and unnerving. It was past 9 p.m., and the city lights of Chicago painted flickering stripes across the polished mahogany floor. The silence was absolute, a thick blanket that felt heavier than the air itself. I was surrounded by ghosts, the ghosts of forgotten transactions, of deals made a century ago. My own reflection stared back at me from the dark glass of a display case, a pale, tired face with eyes too big for my head. I pushed a stray strand of auburn hair from my forehead and turned my attention back to the filing cabinet. It was an antique, made of dark, heavy oak that smelled of wax and time. My boss, Mr. Silas Thorne, had been specific. Everything alphabetized, cross-referenced, and digitized. For an intern, it was a ridiculously high-stakes project. He wasn't like other CEOs. There were no smiling photos of him in magazines, no appearances at charity galas. He was a phantom who ran a global empire from the shadows of his penthouse office. I'd only seen him twice in my 3 months here, both times a fleeting glimpse of a tall, imposing figure in a perfectly tailored suit, his presence sucking all the oxygen from the hallway. I pulled open a heavy drawer, the scent of old paper rising to meet me. My focus was so complete that when the drawer glided shut on its own, with a soft, definitive click, my heart leaped into my throat. I hadn't touched it. Slowly, I turned. He was standing there, not 10 feet away, by the window overlooking the glittering sprawl of the city. Silas Thorne. He hadn't made a sound. It was as if the shadows had simply coalesced and formed him. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at me. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were intense, unsettling. They held a strange mix of curiosity and something else, something ancient and heavy, like stone worn smooth by 1,000 years of rain. "Miss Callahan," he said. His voice was a low, resonant baritone that seemed to vibrate in the very floorboards. "Working late." It wasn't a question. "I wanted to get ahead on the digitization," I stammered, my voice sounding small and reedy. "It's a comprehensive collection." He took a step forward, his movements unnervingly fluid, silent. He was closer now, and I could see the sharp lines of his face, the pale, almost translucent quality of his skin. He looked like a marble statue brought to life, timeless and severe. "It is," he agreed, his gaze drifting from my face to the antique cabinet. "Every book, every ledger tells a story, a lesson in victory or in loss." His eyes found mine again, and for a fleeting second, the coldness in them was replaced by a flash of raw, unfiltered pain. It was so profound, so jarring, it made me take an involuntary step back, he noticed. The mask of the impassive CEO slammed back into place. "I have a new task for you," he said, his tone shifting back to business. "A different collection, more personal." He gestured toward a door I had assumed was a closet. "My private study. There are books in there that predate everything in this room. They require a more delicate hand. I trust you are capable of discretion." My mind reeled. His private study? An intern? This was unheard of. "Of course, Mr. Thorne," I heard myself say. He walked to the door and unlocked it with a heavy, ornate key. The air that drifted out was different. It smelled of vellum, of dried herbs, and something else, something like dry earth after a storm. "Start tomorrow," he commanded, not waiting for my reply. He turned and walked out of the room, dissolving back into the hallway's shadows as silently as he had appeared. The only proof he had been there was the unlocked door and the frantic, unsteady rhythm of my own heart. I tried to dismiss it as the eccentricity of a reclusive billionaire. But as I stood there in the echoing silence, a single, terrifying thought bloomed in my mind. He hadn't been looking at me, Maeve Callahan, the intern. He had been looking at me as if he was seeing a ghost. The next day, I stepped into his study, and it was like stepping into another century. The room had no windows. The walls were lined floor to ceiling with books bound in cracked leather and dark wood. A huge carved desk dominated the center, and the only light came from a green-shaded lamp that cast a pool of soft gold onto its surface. The air was cool and still. The task was overwhelming. These weren't just old books. They were ancient texts. Some were handwritten manuscripts in languages I didn't recognize. Old English, Latin, something that looked vaguely Norse. My instructions, left on the desk in crisp black ink, were simple. Catalog them. Do not attempt to translate. Do not damage them. I spent the first week just trying to make sense of the organization, if there even was one. I worked late each night, long after the rest of the office had emptied. The 44th floor became my own private island, and the study my strange, forbidden kingdom. Mr. Thorne remained absent, but I felt him. I'd feel a sudden chill, the unnerving sensation of being watched, and I would look up to find nothing but shadows. I started talking to myself, just to break the oppressive silence. Okay, 13th century illuminated manuscript, I'd whisper, carefully placing a book on a velvet cloth. And you, my friend, look like you've seen a Viking or two. I tried to anchor myself in normalcy. During my lunch breaks, I'd sit with Chloe, another intern from the marketing department. She was my lifeline to the real world. You're kidding me, she said one afternoon, her fork hovering over her salad. He has you in his secret lair? Maeve, they call him the Phantom of the Penthouse for a reason. Nobody sees him. Word is, he fires people via email. He hasn't attended a board meeting in person in 5 years. He's intense, I admitted, pushing a piece of lettuce around my plate. But it's an incredible opportunity. Is it? Or are you the princess locked in the tower? Be careful. A guy that rich and that reclusive has got to be hiding something weird, like a shrunken head collection or something. I laughed, but her words planted a seed of unease. There was something undeniably strange about my situation. A few nights later, I found it. Tucked away on a high shelf, behind a row of crumbling philosophical treatises, was a small, leather-bound journal. It had no title. The leather was soft, worn smooth by hands that had held it centuries ago. My instructions were to catalog, not to read. But the silence was pressing in, and the journal seemed to call to me. I sat at the huge desk and opened it. The script was a formal, medieval French, elegant and archaic, written with a quill. I imagined it was penned sometime in the 12th or 13th century, a reflection written long after the events it described. It was filled with exquisite, detailed pencil drawings of plants, of castles, of coastlines. And then I turned a page, and my world stopped. It was a drawing of a woman. Her head was tilted slightly, a small, knowing smile on her lips. Her hair was pulled back, but a few rebellious curls escaped, framing her face. My face. The artist had captured every detail with haunting precision. The slight curve of my eyebrows, the shape of my lips, the freckle just to the left of my mouth. I touched my own face, my fingers trembling. It wasn't a similarity. It was me. A perfect, impossible copy. Beneath the drawing, a single name was written in the same elegant script. Isolde. A wave of vertigo washed over me. I slammed the journal shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was crazy. It was a coincidence. It had to be. I shoved the journal back on the shelf, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I tried to work, to focus on the ledgers and the manuscripts, but the face in the drawing was burned into my mind. Isolde. The name echoed in the silent room. That night, Mr. Thorne appeared again. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice him until he spoke, his voice pulling me from my daze. You seem distracted, Miss Callahan. I jumped, dropping a heavy tome. It landed on the floor with a deafening thud. Before I could even move to pick it up, he was there. He knelt, his movements impossibly fast and graceful, and lifted the book with one hand, as if it weighed nothing. I had struggled to get it off the shelf with two. He placed it on the desk, and his long, pale fingers brushed against mine. A shock, cold as ice, shot up my arm. It wasn't just cool, it was the deep, profound cold of a frozen lake. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned. He saw my reaction. His eyes narrowed, and that look of pain, the one I'd seen before, flickered across his features. "Be careful," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "They are irreplaceable." He was talking about the book, but his gaze was fixed on my face, and I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that he meant something else entirely. After that night, things changed. He started appearing in the study more often, always silently. He would stand for long periods, watching me work. He never spoke much. He'd ask about my progress, his questions precise and detached. But his eyes told a different story. They followed my every move, filled with the desperate, hungry longing that made my skin crawl. He was fighting something. I could see the tension in the set of his jaw and the way his hands would clench into fists at his sides. I felt like a bug under a microscope, or worse, like a laboratory rat in a maze designed by a madman. I tried to act normal, to keep our interactions professional. But every time I looked at him, I saw the journal, the drawing of Isolde. The questions were a swarm of bees in my head. Who was she? Why did I look so much like her? Who had written the journal? Was it his? The denial I had clung to was starting to crumble, replaced by a creeping dread. Chloe's words came back to me. A guy that rich and that reclusive has got to be hiding something weird. This was beyond weird. This was impossible. My breaking point came a week later. I was leaving for the night, heading for the elevator. As the doors opened, a junior executive from finance, a friendly guy named Ben who had asked me out for coffee twice, was stepping out. "Maeve, working late again, I see," he said with a warm smile. "That coffee offer still stands, you know. You deserve a break from this crypt." I smiled back, a genuine smile for the first time in what felt like weeks. "I'd like that, Ben. How about—" He never got to finish his sentence. A cold presence fell over the hallway. I didn't have to look. I knew Mr. Thorne was there. I saw the smile freeze on Ben's face, the color draining from it. Mr. Thorne was standing at the end of the hall, near the entrance to his study, perfectly still. He wasn't looking at Ben. He was looking at me. His expression was placid, but his eyes were glacial. They held a silent, deadly command. Ben seemed to shrink under that gaze. Actually," he stammered, backing away. "I just forgot something. Good night, Maeve." He practically fled back into the elevator, jabbing the closed door button like his life depended on it. The doors slid shut, leaving me alone in the hallway with Silas Thorne. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. He hadn't moved. He hadn't said a word, but the threat had been as clear as a scream. The fear I had been suppressing erupted into hot, white anger. Who did he think he was? My keeper? I marched down the hall, my heels clicking sharply on the marble. I stormed into the study, grabbed the journal from its hiding place, and threw it down on his desk. It landed open, to the page with her face. My face. "Who is she?" I demanded, my voice shaking with adrenaline. "Who is Isolde? And why do you look at me like you're seeing a ghost?" He walked slowly into the study, his face an unreadable mask, but his eyes were burning. He looked from the journal to my face, and a muscle in his jaw twitched. For a long moment he said nothing. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy, each word weighted with centuries of sorrow. She was my wife. The words hung in the air, simple and devastating. My anger evaporated, replaced by a cold knot of dread in my stomach. "Was?" I whispered. He walked over to the great desk, his fingers tracing the outline of the sketch in the book. I lost her. A long time ago. He looked up at me, and for the first time he let me see everything. The mask was gone. The raw agony in his eyes was so complete, so ancient, it was like looking into the abyss. "You have her face," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Every detail. It is a cruel magic." I sank into the leather chair opposite the desk, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "How long ago?" I asked, though I already knew the answer was one I wasn't prepared for. He looked at the sketch again. "She died in the autumn of the year 994. The date slammed into me. Not 1894. 994. Over 1,000 years ago. My logical, 21st century mind tried to reject it. It was impossible. A joke. A test. But looking at his face, at the profound, unwavering grief in his eyes, I knew he was telling the truth. "That's not possible," I breathed. "No one lives that long." His gaze lifted from the book and met mine. In the low light of the lamp, his eyes seemed to glow with an eerie, internal light. "I do," he said softly. "But I do not live. I endure. I have been enduring for 1,028 years. The room seemed to tilt. Chloe's voice was a frantic echo in my head, hiding something weird. This wasn't weird. This was monstrous. A vampire. The word, the concept, was so absurd, so much a thing of fiction and fantasy, that my brain refused to form it. But all the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. His silence, his speed, his strength. The unearthly cold of his skin. His aversion to the daylight, a CEO who never left the shaded confines of his office. It was all there. "What? What are you?" I whispered, the words catching in my dry throat. He took a slow breath, a sound that seemed to rustle like old parchment. "A consequence," he said, "of a terrible choice made in a world of fire and steel. A world where I loved a mortal woman with a heart full of sun, and I tried to steal her from time. Instead, time stole her from me, and my punishment is an eternity of nights to remember it." He told me everything. His name had not always been Silas Thorne. He was born in a Norse kingdom, a warrior who fell in love with Isolde, the daughter of a rival jarl. In a desperate bid to save her from a plague, he made a pact with an ancient, dying creature of the night. The pact saved him from the plague, but it twisted him into what he was now. It did not save Isolde. His enemies, mortal men who feared his newfound power, found her. They burned his home, and she died in the flames, while he, now impervious to fire but not to grief, was held back, forced to watch. He had spent the next millennium building a fortress around himself, an empire of wealth and power, a cold, empty castle to match his cold, empty existence. He collected memories, the books, the ledgers, because his own were a curse. "I never thought I would see her face again," he said, his voice raw. "And then you walked into my company, an echo I never expected, a ghost in the machine." He stood and walked to the far side of the room, putting distance between us. "I brought you up here because I am selfish. I wanted to see her again, to hear her voice. But you are not her. You are fire and wit, and you question me. She was gentle, like the morning mist. You are different. And that, I find, is even more torturing." The confession hung in the chilled air, a tapestry of myth and pain. This powerful, intimidating man was reduced to a grieving specter, haunted by a love 1,000 years dead. The fear was still there, a cold snake coiled in my belly. But now it was mingled with something else, an impossible, heartbreaking empathy. He turned to face me fully, his expression resolved. "Terrible. This was my story to tell. But it is not yours to carry," he said, his voice firm again, the CEO taking control of the monster. "I can make you forget. I can reach into your mind and pluck these last few weeks from your memory like a splinter. You will wake up tomorrow. your internship at its end. You will find a new job. You will live your life. You will never see me again. I will give you the peace I can never have. He was offering me an escape. A return to the normal, sunlit world of coffee dates with men like Ben, of worrying about rents and student loans, a world where monsters were just stories. All I had to do was say yes. I looked at him, truly looked at him. I saw the warrior, the lover, the grieving husband, the lonely billionaire. I saw a man who had been trapped in his own personal hell for 1,000 years. Forgetting seemed like the ultimate betrayal, not of him, but of the sudden shocking truth I had found. Forgetting seemed easy. It seemed cowardly. I thought of Isolde, the woman with my face. He wasn't seeing her anymore when he looked at me. He had said it himself. He was seeing me. My mind was screaming at me to run, to say yes, to take the escape hatch he was offering. My heart, however, was doing something else entirely. It was breaking for him. I stood up, my legs feeling steadier now. I walked across the space that separated us. He didn't move, just watched me, his storm gray eyes wide with a fragile, terrified hope. I stopped just before him. I could feel the cold radiating from his body, a tangible aura. "I am not her," I said softly, but my voice didn't waver. "My name is Maeve, and I don't want to forget." He flinched, as if my words were a physical blow. "You don't understand what you are choosing," he whispered. "This world, my world, is filled with shadows. There is no peace here." I raised my hand, slowly giving him time to pull away. He remained still, a statue carved from ice and sorrow. I placed my palm gently against his cheek. The cold was shocking, absolute, but it wasn't repulsive. It was just him. Under my hand, I felt the slightest tremor. "Then you won't have to face them alone anymore," I said. He closed his eyes, and a single, perfect tear traced a path down his stone-cold cheek. It was the first tear he had shed in 1,000 years. He didn't smile. A man like him didn't know how. But for the first time since I had met him, the endless winter in his eyes receded, just for a moment. And in its place, I saw a flicker of something I never thought I would see from Silas Thorne, the barest, most fragile dawn of a new day. His hand was cold as he finally reached up to cover mine, but as his fingers intertwined with my own, I felt a warmth spread through my chest, a quiet, impossible fire against the encroaching night.